Welcome to Three and Out with Jason and Kevin. I'm Jason. That's Kevin. Obviously, we're joined by a couple new people or a couple other people here. We'll get to them here in a second. Again, we're on the Orange and Black Insider on YouTube. It's us and it's Anthony and John over at OBI. And then on the Believe Network, Believe in Cincy is the channel. It's us. It's OBI. It's Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, and it's Matt and Willie No Ball. Today, we're joined by the Andrew and Ryan from Gridiron Grading. You may be familiar with them on Twitter, but yeah, we're pretty pumped. We're going to talk about the draft. We're going to talk about their system, how they grade some players, and yeah, take it away.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having us on. Andrew and I are super excited to be here joining y'all. As you mentioned before, we are Andrew and Ryan. We are Gridiron Grading on X, and that's sort of our big and only platform right now. Just to give you all a quick rundown of what we do, we are huge Cincinnati Bengals fans, but even more important than that, we're huge NFL draft fans at heart. So for the previous 5 years, we've been looking at different ways of approaching the draft and valuing and evaluating different players. And we really came up with an analytics first approach that looks at sort of the underlying numbers between prospects across all of their college seasons, factoring in their on-field production, their athleticism, some film scores as well, just to get somewhat of a holistic understanding of all of these prospects from that analytics perspective. And that's resulted in a really big Google sheet each and every single year, starting from, I think, about 200 prospects in our first year up to what we're anticipating is going to be in the 750 prospect range this year. And we're just really excited to be able to share that with y'all and sort of talk about the NFL draft and specifically some Bengals favorites as well.
Now, you sent us an app, and it was kind of a peek behind the scenes. We'll probably bring it up here in a minute. But you guys have some a lot of consensus grading for some, but some very high grades on some players that maybe a lot of people don't. Why do you think that is? Do you weigh certain things heavier based on a correlation to how it performs in the league? Like, what makes your process a little different than what we see just on a general mock draft board?
Yeah, no, happy to take that one, Kevin. So I think the three aspects we look at, guys, we look at one, college production. That's our biggest factor, and I think what differentiates us the most from what you might be seeing on the internet, and what that is looking at, like Ryan said, their entire career, and we take specific analytical metrics for each of those positions and what we've found to be important, and we have weighted those to prospects from the last 10 years. So that's one aspect. We also look at the athletic portfolio for our players. So typically that's been all Math Bomb on Twitter. I think everybody's familiar with Kent's work and his cards. Yes. But this year we're looking at every test individually and how we have seen that play out to success. So you're going to see different athletic scores for prospects this year for us. And then, like Ryan said, we look at 700 plus prospects. So we are not watching the film. This is not our full-time job, but there are evaluators on the internet that we value their opinions. So we use those scores, and then we also add in positional value for each of these players. So I think what you're really going to see that's the difference is this is completely analytical. We're weighting what we have seen be successful. We're not looking at, how the crowd really views these players. And so that's why you'll see a lot of differences here. And while we'll go to bat for our guys on Twitter often because we feel confident in the process here.
Sure. Yeah, we were kind of talking before this, and I pointed out that you guys are very high on two people I'm very high on. I'd love it if you talk a little bit about why Fannin first and then David Walker, the edge, are so high on your guys' board.
Yeah, I think we can start with Harold Fannin, and obviously people see some incredibly impressive counting stats over his entire career, capped off by leading all of Division I football in receiving yards as a tight end, which is something we haven't really seen since Jace Amaro coming out of Texas Tech. And what really separates Fannin for us apart from the rest of the tight ends in this year's class, but also from a lot of the tight ends we've seen in previous years, is that while those counting stats are so big and so impressive, all of the underlying metrics that we look at as well are just insanely eye-popping. His yards per route run is something that we really haven't seen from any tight end, not even a Brock Bowers type player, for a very, very long time. And that's something that Andrew and I have come to learn correlates to success in the NFL, but it's also something that we value as a metric in our analysis. So really, Harold Fannin is just a player that excels in almost every facet of the game. He's even an average to above average blocking tight end, depending on how you look at it. So he's someone that, as you'll see, we're incredibly high on. And like you mentioned before, Kevin, that's someone that we're really willing to plant our flag on. And there might be a difference between consensus, but we feel good about him as a really high upside receiving threat with some good blocking to go along with it.
I'm glad you mentioned the blocking, because that's the one thing you always see the big like ding against him. And I don't do what you guys do. I'm much more casual as far as these kind of like this process is concerned. But everything I watched on Fannin, I mean, I'm not saying he's the world's best blocker. I'm not saying that. But to act like it's this huge weakness in his game, I just wasn't seeing it. So I'm glad that you guys are saying the same thing. Because if we grabbed him day one, I'd be ecstatic. Not that I expect the Bengals to. But I would be absolutely for it. And then I just want to bring up David Walker. Way back when, I can't even remember who, but he got on my radar as a possible late pick for the Bengals. And you guys look like you have a round 2 grade on him. We could use the edge help. Sell me on David Walker.
Yeah, so Kevin, we love David Walker. I think the production number, that's what's going to stand out as you look at that there. So one thing that we've seen, Ryan mentioned yards per route run for tight ends. For defensive ends, for edge players, and interior defensive linemen, it's win rates coming off of the line. David Walker has the #1 career profile in true pass set win rate. So that's those pure dropbacks. He's won over 33% in his college career. He also went and he tested pretty well, I think. Once you see like those numbers, they stand out. But then listening to some of the film buffs out there, compare David Walker to players like Brandon Graham, you start to feel a little bit more confident in this. And so you can take those production numbers, you see the testing to go along with it, you see him go out there and perform at the Senior Bowl. And so that's bumping those film numbers up a little bit. And you have a guy where the only knock is level of competition. And so we do actually factor that into our production scores here. So he'll get 0 out of 10 on the level of competition. But that really doesn't matter for Walker because he was so dominant at Central Arkansas that he gets that bump still there. So I expect him probably to end up in that round 3 or round 4 range because of the size, because of the level of competition. But we like him more than a lot of the guys coming from these big name schools. And profiles like this do tend to do pretty well. And I think people might knock his size, but he was tremendous against the run too. It wasn't just pass rushing. And so we would stand on the table. Again, we talked about it before, guys. Maybe we don't see the Bengals doing this because of the height, but he's going to be a tremendous player for some team out there. And we would definitely, if you're looking to add to your pass rush, David Walker would be very high on our list.
Yeah, he's high on mine as well. Go ahead, Jason.
I want to jump back to Fannin just for a minute. I know I don't want to, spend all day on him, but I'm not saying I don't like him because I do. I just want to play devil's advocate for a second. So first of all, I want to ask you, what do you think is what is it that you look at that has the highest, I'm trying to think what it's like. Is it production that you weigh heaviest, or is it their athletic ability that you weigh heaviest, or what is it that has,
or does it vary by
you
position?
think? Yeah, or does it? Yeah, it could vary by position too. So what score is it that you're looking at to say, hey, this is the big number that I want to see for this position?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. So we did a lot of work on that in the offseason. Like Kevin mentioned, it does change for every position, but for tight end, production has the heaviest weight. So we're looking for yards per route run. That's a big one. If they cross that 1.5 to 1.6 number, that puts them in position to be in the 85 to 90% of tight end ones hit that number. Fannin blew that out of the water. And then you get to the athletic side, and that's where the knocks on Fannin are going to start to come in. So what we're looking for is, did they run under a 4.740? Fannin ran a 4.71, so he's right at that border. Do they jump over 118 to 119 in the broad jump? That's one we've noticed too. Fannin was right at 118. So as you look at that, it makes the profile a little fuzzier. You'll see he's still going to grade really well for us because that production number, we haven't seen anything like it. But if you do want to say, hey, here are some red flags, I think there are some questions around Fannin because of that athleticism number. And you see him on film as well. I think there's jokes that he kind of moves like a duck. He waddles around a little bit. He's very effective when he's out there. He had dominant games versus Penn State and Texas A&M. So he did show that. But I think the questions around how's the team going to use him, they need to have a plan. I think all of that's very fair with Fannin because he didn't knock every single tight end one metric out of the park. We would have liked the athletic testing to be a little bit further up there. I think one thing you could note is he's one of the youngest players in the class too. He's only 20 years old still. And so what would testing look like if he was 21 or 22? That's not something we factor into athleticism specifically, but I think it's a fair consideration.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know Kevin said that he'd be thrilled if they took him in the first round. I don't. I think most Bengals fans would be furious if they took Harold.
I'm sure they
in the
would.
first round.
Yeah.
Where do you see him? Where do you see him going in the draft? Do you think that most people are pretty high on him? Like, I think he's a day 2 guy, or do you think he falls to day 3?
Yeah, I think you guys hit it perfectly on the head, and Andrew's mentioned this before too. Fannin is not necessarily a scheme-specific player by any means, but he needs to go to a situation where the head coach and the offensive coordinator can really maximize his skill set and use him in creative ways, whether that's manufacturing touches, putting him in the slot some, putting him in line some. And with how the Bengals have used tight ends recently, and the fact that whether we like it or not, I think there's about 5 or 6 guys under contract in that room. Obviously, it's not a selection that we're expecting to make at 17, but you can see based on the grade, we think that he, at least in terms of true talent, is worthy of a first-round grade based on public perception, whether that comes from really highly regarded draft pundits or other folks in the media. We're probably looking at a realistic landing option sometime on day 2. I definitely don't expect that he's going to escape the 3rd round. And I think Andrew agrees. He could disagree with me on that one. But I think when you're trying to match up value for who Fannin is and the type of player and what he brings to the table, you're looking in that 2nd or 3rd round sweet spot to a team that's really going to get creative with him and try and maximize his full potential.
Yeah. I'm expecting guys probably in 50 to 80 range. I hope he goes to a team like the 49ers, even that is going to use him. But
gotcha. All right.
Yeah, not expecting the Bengals are going to go crazy for Harold Fannin.
No, I don't either. But this is
we can dream.
This time of year is it's where you get your hopes up. It's where you build up your expectations just to ultimately pick Miles Murphy round 1 on draft day.
So this is a good transition, actually. So I know that you said it's probably not, they're probably not going to go after Harold Fannin in round 1. I don't know if they're really going to do anything free agency wise between now and the draft. They probably won't, outside of hopefully extend Trey Hendrickson. If that's the case, and they just have Trey Hendrickson, they don't really do anything else. Do you think they have to go defense in the first round, regardless of who could possibly be available? Or do you think that's going to happen no matter what anyway?
And Ryan and I just did a mock draft earlier this week, and what you're looking at, I think, is interior defensive line or edge or interior offensive line, one of these tackles that might fall that you could plug into guard. Kelvin Banks is a name that is very high on our target list for that reason. Because I don't know, I'm not in those conversations, obviously, with the Bengals, but as you look at the roster from the outside, I think guard is even a bigger need than what they have on the defensive side. So 100%. If there's a guy that you could plug in there at guard, I would absolutely. Kelvin Banks, we're incredibly high on him. If he's on the table, I think he meets a lot of what they look for in first-round picks too. Outside of that, yeah, Jason, to your point, you're probably looking at defense is going to be the best player on the board at that point.
Kelvin Banks is slowly becoming my dream pick. I can have fun, you know what I mean? I can think about, like I'm talking about Fannin and everything else, but everything I'm seeing about Kelvin Banks, he just keeps going higher and higher on my mental board. And also, who's complaining about it might be the most fun pick, but who's complaining about finally having a guard you can actually trust? Again, a O-line you can actually trust to protect Burrow. We had briefly had some okay guard play there for a little bit, but it's always been an issue. And sometimes you got to eat your vegetables. Sometimes you got to grab a guard round 1. I would have no issue with that. It's actually slowly becoming, like I said, one of my dream picks. Like if I had maybe a top 5, he's up there.
I have a question about another guard that I think in general people are pretty high on, especially in Cincinnati, and that's Tate Ratledge. But I've seen mock drafts where he goes in the 3rd round. I've seen mock drafts where he goes in the 2nd round. I've seen him go in the 4th round. How do you guys feel about Ratledge?
Yeah, so Andrew actually put out a great tweet recently about our thoughts on Tate Ratledge, and he's looking to be one of the only, if the only, true interior offensive lineman in this class that we give a bona fide first round grade to. And I think over the however many 5 years that we've been doing this, he will join a group of about 6 others only of true interior offensive linemen who we've given a first round grade to. And that includes guys like Tyler Linderbaum, and I'm sure Andrew can correct me on some of the ones I miss. I think Cam Jurgens or Landon Dickerson, one of them might have been up there as well. But he's someone that we're much higher on than consensus. And I think the 2 things that immediately come to mind with him are that athleticism. You see the 99.6 up there. He's an incredibly strong athlete, and he excels in the areas that we're looking for out of offensive linemen too. That sort of lateral quickness, those agility scores, that's something where we're super, super high on with him. But he's also incredibly strong in pass protection. And with the way this Bengals offense operates, whether it's Calvin Banks, like we mentioned before, or Tate Ratledge, that's a skill set that this offense should really prioritize. And he's someone that really checks that box from a pass protection perspective. So we're definitely higher than consensus. If you're having some fun on the mock draft simulators, we personally don't expect him to be available at 81, which we see him go sometimes. And with each passing day, we're not entirely sure he's even going to be available at 49 for the Bengals.
That's my worry, because I also always grab him. I mean, he's a instant grab in round 2 or round 3 of any mock drafts you do. But you're not the only ones who are high on him. You're starting to just see everybody discovering Tate Ratledge, and suddenly he's creeping up these boards. And I could see him going early round 2 to the right team and kind of dashing all of our dreams. But talk about drafts.
If you want a pure guard, Kevin,
yes,
he's one of the few in the class, so definitely could see that popping up. I think last comment there is you typically see like 9 to 11 offensive linemen go in that top 50. He's right at that 10 to 11 range in this class. So if you're the Bengals, you really want him, you might have to move up.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry to cut you off, Kevin. I know you were moving along.
No.
My final thoughts on where Tate might land there.
I'll be crossing my fingers, and then he'll still be there, and then we'll just pass on him anyways. But yeah, we were hoping to do a mock draft with you guys, mostly just an excuse to kind of look at the board as like maybe consensus generally shows it, and get your takes, what you would do, who you think maybe is a little overrated. So we can finish up the episode doing a mock draft. Are you guys like cool with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it.
PFF
is that different approach?
Is that good with you guys? The Pro Football Focus one?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%
good with that.
All right. So we'll do all 7 rounds. I'll do it a little bit slower so we can kind of see what's going on. And then I don't know if you want me to mess with any of the settings. Just leave them as is. And
I think Ryan's the expert on the PFF simulator.
I get a little funky with them. I typically put the public PFF slider at least 1 or 2 towards PFF. Don't get us wrong. We love the public, but at some point we also trust the fellas over at PFF. They do a great job. Andrew mentioned earlier in the show, but we factor in positional value into our grades. So we typically put positional value up 1.
Okay.
Our personal philosophy is, as much as it is great to match need and value, hopefully your needs are filled in free agency. So we typically knock draft for needs down 1. And then if you want to get spicy with it, feel free to play with the randomness, but otherwise we can leave that 1 where it is if that's okay with y'all.
So it looks good right there?
Beautiful.
Okay, cool. Let's get going here. Now, there's one thing I also wanted to say before we get started, and maybe we'll see here in the first round. This draft class seems tailor-made for the Bengals to trade back. It seems like accumulate maybe another pick, another second-round pick, third-round pick, whatever it happens to be. But it seems that there's so many players that they could target or could fill a need for them that have first-round grades that they could easily drop back a couple picks. What do you guys think about that?
I definitely agree with you on that, Jason. I think once you get into that 17 range, we've seen in some of the early mocks we've done, you're looking at 5 or 6 players that might be in the same tier and that fill the Bengals' needs at some level. And so for me, they have 6 picks. They didn't do enough in free agency to fill needs. And so I would like to have as many dart throws as I could if I were the Bengals. And because of where the talent levels are in this class, I think there are a lot of great players as you get into the 30 to 90 range. I'd like to add another pick, even if that means you're losing a little bit of value, just because so many of the players in that range, I think in the first round are going to be neutral on boards.
Okay. All right. We'll get started here. Abdul Carter 1. Travis Hunter, Cam Ward. Okay. I did see today that Cleveland, I saw someone say that Cleveland's not likely to take Sanders.
That would make sense. See. I don't know if I would do that early.
All right.
Kenneth Grant at 16. That would be interesting.
So I'm just kind of wide open. Again, we have edge here. I mean, Walter Nolan is a guy that I like a lot. Anything
Kelvin
particular
Banks, we already mentioned, was a standout. Yep. Where are you guys on Gray Zabel? I've been seeing him creep his way into the first round, but I haven't spent a lot of time looking at him personally yet.
Yeah, Gray Zabel's tough, Kevin. I think the production metrics look good, but he chose not to test at all. And for us, anybody who doesn't test athletically, unless they're a bona fide top 5 guy like Abdul Carter,
right?
I just don't think the Bengals have the flexibility to take that risk that early. We've seen their recent offensive line picks that don't test completely flop. And so I would be very worried. And I think there's enough players here that have complete profiles that unless you're looking at Gray Zabel at 49, I don't know if I would make take that chance.
Fair enough. The other one that jumps out to me is Nick Scowerton. Not because he's a personal favorite, but I do feel like he hits a lot of things the Bengals would be looking for at the position. Do you have any thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think if we could get the 2023 season version of Nick Scowerton, the one from Purdue, obviously he'd be much higher on these boards, so we might not be in that position. But that's a player we absolutely fell in love with. And obviously 2024 was a little bit difficult there, so the production took a hit and he dropped down on our board. So it's someone we would potentially consider in the 49 range, but I think there are unfortunately too many question marks to feel comfortable taking him there at 17. But one thing we will say is that we've recently put an emphasis on players that have proven themselves in college. And what we mean by that is they've done what you are hoping them to do in the NFL at the college level. And he's someone that's proven in college he can rush the passer. So again, a good player, someone we would absolutely consider for the team, but maybe 17 would just be a little bit too rich for that player in particular.
Okay.
Anything here that you're seeing that stands out? Sorry. Anything here you're seeing that stands out?
Yeah, I think if we're being realistic, Jason, I think we'd be looking at Walter Nolan as a guy I think they'll be very high on. I wish he would have done some athletic testing because it does add an element of risk to his profile. I think obviously Kelvin Banks, that would probably be our pick. I think that's who Ryan and I went with in the mock we did earlier this week. But maybe for the sake of changing it up, I think Walter Nolan will be very high. I think Derek Harmon will be high. He also fits, but Harmon also didn't do athletic testing. So for us, he'll be a little lower than you might see. But I think if you're looking at what the Bengals would consider here, I think you're looking at Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, Kelvin Banks. If it were us, we would have James Pierce on that list too. But I think from what we understand, and there's no way for us to factor this into our board, there are some character concerns there. And you never know if that's just agent speak, somebody trying to knock him down or not. But I don't expect that that's even a mildly realistic option for the Bengals at this point. So I think you're really deciding between those 3 guys. And I don't know, Ryan, if you have conflicting thoughts there, Banks, Nolan, and Harmon. If it were me, I would choose Nolan over Harmon just because I think he can rush the passer at the same level as Harmon, but he also had much more run defense production, and I feel more comfortable with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty aligned on all those names. The only reason why I lean offensive line this early in the draft is because I think the interior defensive line group has a lot more depth, and especially when you're looking in that 50 overall on the board range, you have a lot more options at defensive line than I think you do offensive line. And as silly as this might sound, just looking at the Bengals roster construction, they have 4 interior defensive linemen under contract, and 2 of them are recent signees or re-signees in BJ Hill and TJ Slayton. And then you've got Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson. So if they take one in the first round, just based on how the roster looks, that's your 10th defensive lineman, and you're probably set at that position. Whereas a lot of us have been saying this team can't really go into next season with a trio of Cody Ford, Cordell Volson, or Lucas Patrick as 2 of your starting guards. So that's personally why we lean Kelvin Banks and why we did it earlier. I know it's pretty chalky, so if that's not the route we want to go, I agree with Andrew. Walter Nolan is the interior defensive lineman I would take, but that's sort of where we're thinking from, draft and a roster construction perspective.
Okay. So I mean, I would have been more in on Nolan, but I think you've kind of convinced me that the possibility exists in the second round to get some depth at the defensive line position. And especially, you don't want to do anything that could hamper the production, or not the production, but the development of Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson or anything like that. What do you guys want to do? You want to do Banks? Either way, I kind of both.
I think if we're keeping it honest to our board too, and what we would do, it would be Kelvin Banks every time here.
Let's do Kelvin Banks. All right.
The neat thing about Banks too is he is a left tackle. That's where he played at Texas for 3 years, started as an 18-year-old. And so you're bringing him inside. While I think he can hold his own at guard and be a good guard, I think he's more natural at left tackle. So if you choose to not re-sign Orlando Brown in a few years, I think it's completely reasonable to assume that the position flexibility could push him over the edge for the Bengals.
There's also, there's also some injury insurance there. If something were to, big guys, big tackles like that are injury proof.
Yeah, I agree. And if we want to compare him to Mims last year, even, I think we like him a little more. He played a full 3 years and was just as good of a pass blocker. So I think that's great 2 years in a row.
All right, so that brings us to 49, and here's who we're looking at here. I did have a question, and we kind of got into the draft, and Cam Scatabo is available here, and you guys had a first round grade on him, and I'm of the opinion that the Bengals they should just stay far away from running back unless it's a late round pick, just because I think it's a wasted pick. The offense flows through Burrow, and why take touches away from Chase Brown? Kevin likes the idea of adding, a steady, where there's a steady run game that puts fear into the defense, keeps them honest. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one because as an individual player, we are big fans of Cam Scatabo and his game. A lot of the analysis we've done, both from a production and an athleticism standpoint, give really strong comparisons to Kareem Hunt, who has been a really good player throughout his NFL career and has had a lot of success on multiple teams now. So if there's an offense out there looking for really do-it-all back that can sort of carry that load, we would absolutely understand Cam Scatabo being that pick as late as 49 and most likely earlier based on our projection. But as a Bengals specific fit, I think it gets a bit tricky because the same offensive line issues that have plagued Burrow as a passer throughout his entire career have also been a detriment to our run game. And a lot of fans on X and that we've spoken to personally are always clamoring about how it seems like players like Chase Brown are getting touched or tackled in the backfield, and there's really not a lot of balance there. And not to put all of the blame on the offensive line, but I think that's a big part of it. So as much as I would personally vouch for adding another dynamic offensive piece, especially at the running back position, the difficulty with the offensive line and the style of offense that the Bengals play, personally for me, makes it a little bit more of a difficult fit to project going into the future.
Okay. So
yeah, I can respect that take, especially considering, at least personally, I'm considering this a 2-year process to get back into fighting shape for where we need to be. And a good running back can hit the ground. I'm not trying to make a pun here, but can hit the ground running day one. So if you're looking at a 2-year rebuild, investing in a running back high would definitely be a year 2, as opposed to the trenches, which generally take about a year before you finally start seeing what the player is actually going to be capable of. So I get behind that. Scatabo is a really fun pick, but most likely not a good pick. Let's put it that way for where the team currently is. Who are you guys looking at here, Jason? Let's scroll around just a little bit. Who's jumping out at you guys as far as value or somebody you guys personally would really? Jack Sawyer, that's a divisive prospect. Where okay, let's put you on the spot here. Where are you guys at on Jack Sawyer? I'm not certain I love him, but where are you guys at?
He's probably going to end up with a round 3 grade for us. I think with Jack Sawyer, he does have college production that I think meets the threshold you'd want to see. But I think the worry with him is how athletic was he? Does it translate? And I know he measured with an arm length and like the 0 to 2nd percentile, which is worrisome. So you would have liked to see really elite agilities at least. And he decided to not test at all. So for us, that kind of confirms the risk there that he probably didn't want to test because he knew it wasn't going to be great. And so for us, I don't think you can do that earlier than round 3 because I think there's a lot of risk there. So that's one pick we're a little worried about is Jack Sawyer that early.
How do you guys feel about the other
Bengals liking Jack Sawyer? Yeah, which is the 100%. Other problem.
How do you feel about the other Ohio State edge, the JT Tuimalu? Terrible pronunciation, but
yeah, I think he's another guy, Jason, that's probably going to be in that round 3 to round 4 range. He did did pretty well, but there was nothing I think that elevated him above a round 3 grade for us, and so I have to pull him up over here in our sheet. But I think a lot of it was just he looks like a solid guy, a solid rotational defender. And if I'm the Bengals right now, I need somebody who is going to be a really good pass rusher, somebody who can come in and be an impact player. So I would be taking chances on those types of guys here. And the one name that stands out as I look through this is Carson Schlesinger. I know it's a linebacker, but he's going to have a borderline round 1 grade for us. He just tested like a freak athletically at a private workout. They're going to need a starting linebacker. If that holds, I think here I'm looking for a guy who's going to fall. So he's pretty high on my list. Not seeing an interior defensive lineman here that really stands out. I don't know, Ryan, about you as you look through this. And I know PFF sometimes has their big board can be a little wonky too.
Yeah, I mean, one name that maybe a week or two ago that would have really stuck out to us would be Omar Norman Lott out of the University of Tennessee. And when you're specifically looking for interior pass rush, he is one of the better pass rushers in this class. But there are a couple of red flags that stick out to us. I mean, he didn't have a lot of playing time during his Tennessee career, and I don't think that speaks to him as a player. They do a lot of funky things, rotating anywhere from 6 to 8 guys in every single game. But Andrew mentioned before, too, he's one of the players that doesn't have a full athletic testing profile. So as much as you want to lean on the production, we can't necessarily put all of our eggs into that basket. Someone that the community is pretty divisive on, but we feel relatively strongly about is the University of Kentucky's Dayon Walker. And I know he's much lower on PFF Sport. I think they have him in the 80s right now. But he's someone that Andrew and I genuinely would consider at pick 49 for the Bengals. And there are a lot of things that people can comment to. He had a down year in 2024, whether that was concerns from a back injury that was recently disclosed, or some people have also mentioned a motor issue. Does he love football? Does he love giving it every single play? We can't necessarily factor that into our evaluation. And a lot of the times, too, I don't know how much we believe all of that nonsense going on. But what he did show is that in 2022 and 2023, he was an absolutely dominant interior defensive lineman as a 19 and a 20-year-old. And while we did have that production dip in 2024, among the group of IDL available, he's someone that we feel relatively strongly about, especially at pick 49.
Okay. Well, what do you guys want to do here?
As I look at this board, and I know we talked about the interior defensive lineman here, I think if you're looking to get value meets need, Carson Schlesinger is going to be leagues above the next best linebacker here. I don't expect him to be there. I think he's probably going to go in that 28 to 42-ish range. Okay. But I think this is enough of a value that if he fell 7 spots, I would be very excited to bring him in. I think he's immediately the best linebacker on the roster. I think better than Logan Wilson. He's a phenomenal prospect. I would be excited about this, and then I'd have to figure out later, are we trading back? What are we going to do to get a few more picks to potentially get on the interior defensive line? But that's where I would be leaning here. He hasn't been a guy that showed up at this range in the mocks we've done so far.
Ryan, you good with that?
Yeah, Schlesinger is my guy. I mean, I think linebacker is a sneaky need for this team because I don't know how much we can trust Pratt. Oren Burks is a fine player, but I think he's a good ADG replacement. And then no knock against UDFAs, but when you're rolling out Mumajong Meta as potentially a guy getting significant snaps out there, Schlesinger is going to come in and potentially be linebacker 2, if not linebacker 1.
All right, let's do that then.
Yeah, I think that's how I'm tackling it. Just you have 4 or 5 needs that they need to hit. Who's the best player available at those positions of need as you go through this? That's how I would be trying to tackle it if I were the Bengals.
Yeah. especially considering a limited amount of picks. If you're trying to maximize like exactly what position you're picking when, you're just going to end up reaching for everybody. But they have enough needs that I don't feel like you need to reach all that far to grab a player who can make an impact year one. I like grabbing linebacker in the second. It's something that we don't generally see. So I think it's going to make this mock draft interesting.
Yeah. So we got your guard. We got a linebacker to hopefully replace Pratt. Still a lot of needs on the team. Still depth of defensive line, depth in the secondaries is an issue, especially if Cam Taylor-Britt continues to regress or struggle or whatever happened with him. And what do you guys?
I think he's going to do a lot better under Golden.
I hope so. Yeah,
I think he will.
Anything catching your eye? At 81 here?
Personally, I wouldn't mind even double dipping on the O-line if that ended up being the best choice. I mean, it sucks, but we absolutely could use another guard. If the right guy was there. But who's jumping out to you guys? Yeah, I know, but real quick. I don't ever grab. He's there sometimes. Yeah. I don't ever grab Tate Ratledge in the third because what am I doing? I'm just hurting my own feelings. That's what I'm doing. Yeah. I am setting myself up for failure because there's just no way. I could see him maybe in the second. I really could.
You see weird things every year, but I don't know. I'd be shocked if that happened. I agree with you, Kevin. Yeah. It makes it hard.
Let's pretend he's not there. Then.
Let's pretend he's not there because he won't be there as far as I'm concerned. And I want to like semi-realistic. Guy falls 5-6 spots, whatever. Guy falls an entire round. I don't know. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I'd be looking at defensive line here. Like, who is the best player available at edge and interior defensive line? This is, to me, David Walker range, even as we talked about him a little bit earlier. I'd also, like you said, Kevin, I'd be willing to double dip here. I think Jonah Savanea there, that makes sense. Wyatt Millam, I think that makes sense. Those are tackles that could also go into guard. I think are being projected to guard. And if I'm the Bengals and there's a chance to add 2 starting guards that young, yeah, I'd be doing that here. But that's where I'd be thinking as I look at this board off the bat.
Now, do you think you guys are uniquely high on David Walker, or do you expect him to go in this range, right around round 3?
I think among most in the draft community, we're probably higher on David Walker than a lot of others. But like Andrew said before, he's a player that leads the class in terms of pass rush efficiency and pass rush win rate. And that's something that a lot of the time you can't really teach. It's an innate ability that he's proven at the college level. So this is the part of the draft where you see a lot of teams getting a bit more comfortable taking a swing or taking a flyer on a player that has that demonstrated pass rushing ability. So we personally wouldn't be surprised if he goes as early as 81 right here. I don't necessarily think we can expect him to go in this range, but I also don't think he goes any lower than, let's say, the mid-4th round. So we're sort of in that wheel spot where you're getting comfortable really betting on that production. And it also just so happens he's a great athlete too. So yeah, we would be totally fine with it.
I actually expect him right in that range, Ryan. I expect him to go around here. I think he will. And I think a name that comes to mind, guys, when I think of David Walker, if you want to put it in Bengals lens, is Carl Lawson. Carl Lawson was the last guy that the Bengals picked who had the production on a win rate level that David Walker has. And so I think if you're looking for somebody that you can comp a little bit, what could he look like coming in? He's probably going to look something like Carl Lawson, if I had to take a guess.
Wouldn't hate that.
Okay. And then here
again, and there's Deion Walker,
Harold Fannin,
106. And again, Harold Fannin, do we expect him in the 3rd? I don't. Although I do think the Bengals will be interested in a tight end once we get to the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds. I just don't see it being realistic. What are you guys seeing here? Who do you think we should pick?
I'm between Deion Walker, David Walker, and then the 2 tackle to guard converts that we mentioned earlier, Wyatt Millam and Jonah Savanea. So I think between those guys, if I were to stack them, I think for me it would be Deion Walker, David Walker, and then I would go Millam over Savanea. And I'd feel really good about that quad of players there to choose from.
Okay.
But I guess based on what we talk about, I'll leave the pulling the trigger here to you guys.
All right, Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement there as well. I think there's a really good chance, like Kevin, you mentioned before, where the team wants to double dip at offensive line and solidify those 5 positions with the best 5 out there. So, especially with the state of the roster, I think they could push that interior defensive lineman draft pick as close to the end of the 6 that they have as possible. And then, if that's the case, we would be totally okay, if not thrilled, with adding Wyatt Millen there as an option as well. He grades super well for us, also offers that flexibility to kick out to tackle long term if that's where you need him. But I think if we want to have a mock draft that tackles as many different areas of need as possible, yeah, Dayon Walker is going to be the top of my list. And then, same as Andrew said, David Walker is also a great option there as well to sort of round out your edge room.
All right, so you guys want to go Dayon Walker then?
Yeah, if it was us,
Dayon Walker.
Dayon Walker would be the pick here. I think the one knock you'll see with him is athleticism, and that's because he's getting compared to a pool of much smaller defensive linemen. So I think that's what we're doing in our athletic model that we're introducing this year, is scaling it to put him with the heavier D linemen, and that bumps up a whole lot more. So you'll see us a little bit higher on him than a lot of folks out there. We think he's a round 2 player.
How big of a need do you think defensive back is, if it's a need at all?
I'm actually less worried about defensive back than I am almost every other position on the field.
Okay. Yep.
Reason being, we really liked Dax Hill, even if we thought he was overdrafted. We really liked Cam Taylor-Britt. We really liked DJ Turner. At the very least, those are 3 late first to second round prospects that they have in that room. And so I at least feel comfortable that there's talent there. Now, safety, I think you could argue like starting in round 3, that might be somewhere to look, but I feel more comfortable there than I do almost anywhere on the trenches.
Well, we're in round 4, pick 119. Harold Fannin is still here, but we're just going to pretend he's not. Anybody here stand out to you guys? Gunnar Helm. How do you guys feel about Gunnar Helm?
A little lower on Gunnar Helm. He tested really poorly to the point where I don't see how he could hit anything other than a tight end 2. And I think as we look at the Bengals roster right now, it already is a bunch of tight end 2s. So I would be trying to get something a little bit more. So one guy we like here is Terrence Ferguson. I don't see him there, but I think if you were looking for a tight end 1, that would be an option around 3. But as I look through this, I'm thinking of running back here. I think that's where this could come into play. Again, I'm thinking another pass rusher potentially here, but I don't know, Ryan, if you have some different thoughts on where you think the board stacks up at this point.
No, I think those positions of need is also where the draft starts to sort of mesh well. And specifically at running back, you're looking at a guy like Basil Tootin right there out of Virginia Tech VUC, who Andrew and I are quite high on and think he's a great player. If you want another offensive lineman, I don't love the value, but Jalen Rivers is someone that a lot of the draft community has thought about kicking inside and playing as a guard as well. So that's definitely an option there. I'll give a shout out to Jack Kaiser. He's someone that we think is a great linebacker prospect, and especially with Al Golden coming in, the fit there is natural. We already took Schwesinger earlier in the 2nd round, so won't be looking to double up on linebacker anytime soon with the limited picks. But the real one that stands out to me is going to be Tootin out of Virginia Tech.
Okay.
The Bengals met with him, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, they ran the position drills at the Virginia Tech Pro Day.
Oh, nice.
So clearly very interested in him. He's in our top 6 running backs in the class. I think the one knock with him is he did fumble a lot at Virginia Tech, so not sure how the Bengals feel about that. I know they typically lean towards guys who hold on to the ball, but he's so explosive out of the backfield. He was so good at Virginia Tech, and I think he does offer something a little different than what Chase Brown has back there. So I could see him come into play. Would be happy in round 4. Round 5 might be more reasonable, but as we scroll through here, I think that's the guy, knowing that we already took a linebacker, that I would be keying in on, Jason, of the people at the top of this list.
All right. Well,
if we're talking running, real quick, just if we're talking running back, I've seen Joe Goodberry. Scroll up just a little bit, Jason. Going on, mentioning Jaden Blue more than once. I mean, speed kills. What are your guys' thoughts on him?
Super fast. He was a receiving back at Texas. He didn't check a lot of the other boxes on the profile, though, for us. He's going to be in that late day 3 range. So I think you can get excited by the 40 time, but there was not a lot else there. Other than that, the testing profile was pretty average to poor. I think you could get excited by the upside. I wouldn't do it this early just because I think there's so many good running backs in this class. I don't want to go down a notch to take a chance on a guy that didn't really show it in college. He was never Texas's top running back. So I would lean Bagel Tootin here over Jaden Blue.
Let's go. Let's go with Tootin then. All right.
And Ryan, is that how you say
especially
it?
with
Is
the
it
Bengals
Bagel?
beating?
I think it's pronounced Basil. I'm not entirely sure. That's how I've heard it before. I do know the last name's Tootin, so at the very least we can rock with that and feel comfortable.
All right.
Sounds cooler that way.
So you got a guard, you got edge, got linebacker, got halfback. Brings us into the 5th round, 2 picks left. What positions are you looking at, or do you just at this point in the draft are you just kind of seeing what's available and being flexible?
Yeah, I think if the draft were to play out this way, where you've solidified the trenches, you've got a great second-level player in Schwesinger, you have an offensive weapon and you're running back in Tootin, it really does open the board for the Bengals to take the best player available or find another player that they've absolutely fallen in love with. Maybe that is when you target a secondary player, specifically a safety, to, I guess, be the heir apparent to Geno Stone or even compete with him for a role this year. But I think with what we've done so far today, it really does open up the board and give the team a lot more flexibility than they had only 4 picks ago.
Anybody here standing out to you?
Yeah, so I think the one guy up top I saw there that you scrolled by, Jason, Simeon Barrow, he wasn't invited to the combine, but he's going to have a round 3 to round 4 grade for us. I think he's just an excellent player. He's a little on the older side, which I actually think is a positive for the Bengals going into this year because it could lead to immediate production. We reference the Rams all the time and how they stacked their defensive line. They picked older guys that showed it in college, that tested well. Barrow fits all of those boxes. I think he could come in and be potentially contribute even earlier than Deion Walker. So that's the guy that catches my eye right off the top there. Okay. As I look through this, but then to Ryan's point, I think you could look at safety here. I think you could look at tight end if a guy fell. And then also going back to the trenches somewhere. I also don't think they've been meeting with a lot of what looks like back of the wide receiver room type of guys. So I wouldn't be surprised if they took a wide receiver here either. It might be a position we haven't talked about enough.
Yeah, I think, there's Chase, who's wide receiver 1, and then there's Higgins, who's wide receiver 1A. And then Kevin and I were talking about a couple weeks ago, trying to figure out who is wide receiver 3, and it's Mike Gesicki. But if you take Mike Gesicki out of the conversation, like, really, who is it? I mean, are we 100% sold on Andre Ucevic? Or or do we feel that Tremaine Burton could possibly do something if he, kind of straightens up?
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. I'm not. When we love Andre Yoshivas as much as anybody on the Bengals, but I agree. Like, as a wide receiver 3, I don't think that's going to put them even in like the top trio of wide receivers. And then Burton at this point, I'm surprised he's still on the team. So that's tough. Yeah. I don't know how you feel confident in that. As you scroll through, though, I'm looking here, Logan Brown, if this was us. And how many have we taken? 1 offensive lineman so far?
Yeah, 1 offensive lineman.
I was also going to mention Luke Kendra. I'm always looking for him.
He's already taken up here.
Yeah, I know. He went like 3 spots earlier or whatever.
Yep.
But and I think you guys were high on him, correct?
Yeah, we like Luke Kendra. We think he's a good player, good production. But one thing that Andrew had mentioned and put out on our Twitter is that he seems to profile, at least for us, more of a center than he does as a guard. I think the arm length isn't necessarily concerning, but that just seems to be a more natural fit for him. And we were incredibly high on Matt Lee. We're still leading that charge into the future. So that's a player where if you're taking a Luke Kendra, you might have a 3-way battle for center snaps between Kendra, Lee, and I forget the name of the guy who's starting for
Karras.
Ted Karras. Yeah, thank you, Ted Karras.
You like Matt Lee that much? You're just
I do like Matt Lee that much. It's a bit later in the day, but I mean, I think at this point you're probably looking at a player that offers you genuine upside at both guard and tackle, and we're just not necessarily confident that Luke Kendra is going to be that player. So great player, good range for him in the 150s, but yeah, the name we keep coming back to in this area is Logan Brown.
I would be so excited to have Logan Brown here. He's going to have a early round 3 to late round 2 grade for us. So interesting with him. He was a 5-star coming out of high school. He was actually a top 10 prospect in the country. He was a shot put thrower. I believe he was placed top in the United States.
Wow.
Interesting, though, is you only have 1 year of production, so that's going to knock him down the board. But I'm looking at the sheet over here. He's in the 86th percentile for us production, 92nd percentile athleticism. That is a profile you get so excited about for an lineman to get in round 5. And again, as a guy that could go tackle to guard, I think he had an interview the other day with the Draft Network where he said he's been trying to flex his positional versatility. So if you could get Kelvin Banks and Logan Brown in the offensive line room, if you're the Bengals, you feel really, really, really good about the guys that you added last year and this year going into the future. And so I would be very hard-pressed to not double down and take Logan Brown here.
I'm sold. I'm sold.
I'm absolutely
Everybody
sold.
else?
Let's do it.
Go Logan Brown?
I
All
would
right,
be
let's do
pumped.
it.
Let's do it.
Rock
All
chalk.
right. And then
Don't
on
actually
to
like
our
Kansas, but
on to the last
And-
pick here.
While this
ahead,
is
sir.
developing, I did have one quick question for you. You guys mentioned Matt Lee multiple times, so I'm assuming you're going to have strong opinions on it. I have seen people kind of playing with the idea that maybe one of the ideas for this offensive line is they want to give Matt Lee a chance at guard. Zach Taylor specifically did say he saw him as both a center and a guard. Do you think Matt Lee would be in the let's put it this way. Do you think Matt Lee could be a good guard based off his profile?
I see why it's appealing because they don't have any super talented or bona fide starting guards on the roster. I think he would be one of the 2 best guards on the team right now, but that's not where I would want to put him. I think if you kind of see what I'm trying to get at is, there's not those guards on the roster, and obviously he's behind Karras, who's a top 3 lineman on the team. So I could see that if they don't add anybody there, throw him in the competition. I think he'd be one of the 2 best there. But I think he profiles as a center almost exclusively. Kind of got an interesting body type. He's taller with shorter arms. He was pretty athletic, but I don't know if he has the base to hold up at guard. I think you're ideally getting him on the move a little bit as a center and can kind of hide him a little bit more in those one-on-ones when you have him there. And he just never played guard in college. So you're really, really projecting there. But I do think with the room they have now, he would probably be one of the top 2 guys there.
What about the possibility of, and I haven't seen that they're talking about doing this or that anyone's thinking it, but like, what if they could say, you know what, we're going to move Matt Lee into that starting center role, and then we're going to move Ted Karras over to guard, because Karras played guard for a lot of his career. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's something that Andrew and I have gone back and forth on, and I think a lot of the community has had the idea as well. The only thing that gives us pause about doing that is Karras had a really great pass blocking season from the center position last year, and we're not necessarily sure that's something you want to mess with or throw a wrench in. And there's always something to be said about getting your 5 best offensive linemen on there.
Right.
But at the same time, switching positions, even if someone's shown it in their career, is not always the easiest thing to do. So maybe if that's something we could see in the preseason a little bit, just to get a bit more comfortable with the idea, we could buy into it a lot more. But I think if Karras is only in Cincinnati for this 1 extra season that he signed on for, and then Lee can take over that role, that's what we feel a little bit more comfortable with, just having both of them as more natural, more comfortable centers. And it's unfortunate that you can't really put one next to the other when that's the case. But we'd probably hold off on that for a little bit.
So what looks good here at 193 is their last pick. So I know we talked about wide receiver.
I think also here, Jason, like tight end could potentially come into play here. Running back, safety would make sense. We are pretty high on Jalen Conyers. I think he's going to be right there in that round 5 to round 4 grade range for us. So that could be interesting. And then I think really you're probably going to see at this point a lot of running backs that are just talented players that fell, because we think this is the strongest running back class in the last 8 or 9 years, going back to that Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook class. So there's going to be a lot of names here that I think are going to become NFL starters. So this would be the range I would also be looking to maybe pick up a guy here.
Yeah, and
what
then
makes you so high on? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Kevin.
We're talking tight ends. Tight end room is probably one of the weakest rooms in the on the team, and we haven't touched it yet. So, what makes you guys so high on Conyers? Why would he be worth kind of taking a swing here?
Yeah, it was the production profile and athletic profile here. So he tested really well at the combine. He was in the 93rd percentile. And then also he hit some of those production metrics that we talked about a little bit earlier. His yards per route run number exceeded that 1.6, and there's only 8 to 9 of them in this class. And so when you combine that production with the athletic profile, I think that's pretty appealing. Again, he didn't crush the 40 and the broad jump and then also have those production metrics, but he did hit 3 out of 4 of those. And so you feel good that at the very least, I think we mentioned Terrence Ferguson. I kind of see him in that range where low end tight end 1 feels like a good spot. And I think here you could take a guy like Conyers, and to me, with Eric All maybe out of the picture here, he's probably the best tight end on the roster if you consider Mike Gesicki a wide receiver there. And so I think he would be pretty high on my list here if he dropped all the way into round 6.
Okay. Ryan, you on board with that one there?
Yeah, I'm on board with that one. Another tight end name I'll just throw out quickly, and I'm not sure where he is in the PFF simulator, but it's Oronde Gadsden out of Syracuse. I think he's very much in that Gesicki mold where he's a receiving first tight end. He played slot receiver at Syracuse for the first 2 years of his career before becoming more of a traditional tight end and getting some more action in line. I don't know if he necessarily adds any diversity to the tight end room the same way that Conyers might add a little bit more with his profile. But if you're looking to sort of bridge that gap between the team hasn't taken a tight end or a wide receiver yet at this point, you're going to bet on some high receiving upside and see what you have. That's another name that I just throw out quickly as someone who passes a lot of those production metrics as well and can be a threat in the passing game.
All right. What are we thinking here, though?
Yeah, I'm between Conyers. No, yeah, go ahead, Kevin. I saw another name, Jason, you scrolled by down there that I think could be a Bengal. It would make sense they met with him is R.J. Mickens from Clemson. He's a free safety. He graded really well for us. The only area he's low is public perception and big boards. He's not very high on those, but production and athleticism, he was tremendous. So I could see him being a guy they look at on day 3 as well. I think I would stack it, like Kevin said, Conyers up top, then probably go Mickens, and then I put Gadsden, Ryan, a little bit lower, just because I think he's a lot like Mike Gesicki.
Okay. Well, let's do Conyers then.
Yeah, Conyers would be my pick just because I do think that the tight end room is weak, incredibly weak. Because I don't consider Gesicki to really be part of it. I don't care what he technically is called. He's a wide receiver almost all the time.
Yeah, he is.
So yeah, and I don't hate him as a wide receiver. I like him, but it just is what it is. So if we could add anything to that tight end room, I would walk out being happy.
All right, so here we go. Here, I take all these grades with they loved it.
Very that's one of the strongest ones we've done.
I've always loved it.
Oh geez, yeah, they didn't like it. It's very mediocre according to them. I like it though. I like the versatility that you guys talked about, especially with the 2 offensive linemen. You know, if they come out of this draft with a top 10 offensive line, maybe. You know, it's hard to say,
in a year
what 2 rookies would do, but if they can come out of this draft with the top 10 soft line, who knows what Burrow could do? Yeah. You know, I mean, he's never had a great one. So I don't know. I like it. I do. I think there's some versatility here. I like everything that you guys said about these guys. So I dig it.
Deion Walker in the 3rd is my personal favorite as far as the value is concerned. I think Walker. I guess I just like Walkers in general because David Walker as well would be high on my list. But I think Deion Walker could be a hell of a player given a year or 2.
I do want to ask real quick, are you guys looking at like a thing? Are you looking at a spreadsheet or are all these players just memory? Yeah, I remember that guy. I like this. Are you looking at something right now to bring all this stuff up?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay. All right. I was impressed. Yeah, I mean, talking about guys in the 6th, I kind of wanted to scroll all the way down to like, prospect 500 and say, what do you guys think about this guy? Just see if he can do it.
Yeah, you'll see. At least me, I specifically targeted guys I knew a little bit more about. I think like you look at this stuff long enough, you start to key in on like guys you really like. That number pops. This is exciting. We've seen this go well with other prospects. Okay, let's get other people excited about them. I think that was cool. I think with Amarius Mims last year, we were pumped really early on to see that he might fall on some of the stuff behind the numbers. So no, definitely could not speak to, you'll see 700 plus grades, but I couldn't speak at least in depth. Maybe Ryan can in depth on probably, I don't know, less than 100 of them, but
yeah, I mean, when you're doing that many players from an analytics perspective, like Andrew said, some of these numbers start to really catch your eye, especially as you go later down. We're not ever going to be able to provide like a fulsome scouting report on all 700 of these guys. But if there's something in each of their profiles that really stands out to us for the good or the bad, it's not necessarily the only thing we latch on to, but it helps keep them memorable. It helps keep our mind fresh. And that's how you can find some really exciting guys like Matt Lee in the 7th. And who knows, maybe a Jalen Conyers in the 6th. So we love it.
Why don't you guys, real quick, before we wrap up here, tell everybody what you got going on, pump your stuff up out there.
Yeah. Is that app going to get dropped, you think, before the draft?
It definitely will. So no, I guess we can lead into that. Yeah, Gridiron Grading on Twitter. We'll have our draft board out again every year. We do the Google Sheet where we're updating in real time during the draft. So that will be out there again. But then, like you two mentioned, Jason and Kevin, you guys popped it up there for us. We will be releasing a web app this year that has quick snapshots of all 720 players on our board right now. It'll let you filter by round grades. That'll say, hey, Gridiron Grading at a round 3. They had a production profile above 70th percentile, and also they're 21 to 22 years old. I want to target those guys. It'll let people filter by that, and we were able to get some headshots in there, so it looks a little colorful. So we're really excited about this. Though one thing we're waiting for is verified ages, because that does affect some of our scores. So that'll go in next week, and then we're hoping to get this out on Twitter, and we'll put it on Patreon actually this year, and we'll be doing a raffle of sorts. But we'll have this out to the public. It'll be free to access, all that stuff. But we're really excited about it. I think for us, it's made it more fun already this year to kind of search through, because filtering's been a thing for us as well when you're talking about 700 plus. But yeah, it'll be open access to everybody.
Awesome.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this is absolutely the type of thing. I could see this being pulled up on my computer right alongside the Beast as the draft is going on, just because you want those that ability to reference players quickly. Players like, oh, I don't know anything about him. He jumped to the 3rd, and I haven't heard his name anywhere but the 6th or the 7th. So you want to pull up that information quick. I could absolutely see this app being great for draft day.
Good stuff. Absolutely.
Hope so. Hope we cover everybody with 720, but every year we miss somebody. Dane never misses anybody, but we definitely do.
Well, we'll put it out there. We don't grade any kickers or punters, so we're definitely going to miss out on the few that might get drafted. But our goal this year is to hopefully have every single position player taken, be featured at some point on our board. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it. And like Andrew said, it's going to be free for everyone. We want to make this accessible, consumable, digestible. And we just appreciate y'all being able to share it with your fan base and share your love with it. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Andrew, Ryan, thank you very much for joining us. Again, check them out. Gridiron Grading on X, formerly Twitter. Again, we are on OBI, Orange and Black Insider on YouTube. It's us, and it's Anthony and John at OBI. And then we're on the Believe Network. Believe in Cincy. It's us. It's OBI. It's Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends. And then it's Matt and Willie No Ball. Andrew, Ryan, thank you guys very much for joining us tonight. Check out their stuff on X, and watch for their app to drop before the draft comes. Again, thank you everybody, and Hoo Day.
Hoo Day.
Appreciate y'all.
Hoo Day.
Hoo Day.